Stream started, Chair.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors, officers, members of the public and press, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Constitution Committee. Obviously, standard procedures apply. Obviously, this is an online meeting and it will be recorded and streamed straight to YouTube. And could I ask members to mute their phones, put their phone on silent, please. And also, if you turn your microphones off unless you're about to speak. Thanks. I'll hand over to Democratic Services to go through the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start the roll call with, I think, Councillor Fleming. I'm not sure if Councillor Fleming's joined us. No, it might be apology from Councillor Fleming. I'll move on to Councillor Harrison.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm here and I have the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howson.
I can see here and I've got the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James.
I can see and hear other than myself, and I believe that I've got all the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Loynes.
Hello. Yes, I can see and hear and I have all the papers. Thank you.
Councillor Marshall. Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yes, present and have all the papers and see and everything else.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Yes to everything, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Tennant.
Yes, I can see here and I have all the paperwork.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call. I'll hand back to the Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest by members? No, I don't see any indication. Can members have a look at the minutes from the last meeting? And if you're happy with those minutes, we'll take them as read. But also, obviously, if there are any questions or comments, we'll take those first. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. It was just under number 19, what and when. And I just wondered if, first of all, the consultations had taken place virtually, and with the Health and Wellbeing Board, you're saying our future, is that planned to be delivered virtually as well? I just wondered how that had gone in our virtual world. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. The community safety plan, that was done, and there was a consultation completed as part of that. In relation to the Health and Wellbeing Board side of things, we are, I don't know if you were involved in it, but just before COVID kind of took hold of everything last year, there was about a good 6 months or more where there was a period of workshops that were built, and we reached out to major stakeholders and community and what have you, and we tried to shape what we would be doing and our priorities for the Health and Wellbeing Board moving forward, because it felt like it was a bit of a talking shop and there wasn't enough action going on. And we came forward with this key set of priorities and targets that we wanted to do, but then COVID hit and everything got thrown out of the window, and we're in the process of picking that back up, and that as part of that we'll be engaging with the public again as in there. Hopefully
that would be great. Yes, it does. And will we be involved in that?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. If everybody else is happy, we'll take those minutes as okay. Items requiring decision. 4.1. Haley.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall in January 2019, the Committee for Standards in Public Life published a report on the ethical standards in local government. Essentially, that report was considered all aspects of the current standards regime relating to the conduct of elected members and set out a number of recommendations. The vast majority of the recommendations in the report are for central government to action. However, the first of the recommendations was that the Local Government Association were asked to update and produce a model member code of conduct. After extensive consultation, That model has now been produced and a copy is attached. The code has been considered by the Council's Audit and Governance Committee on the 7th of January. Members were welcomed the model code and the inclusion of a bullying and harassment policy, something that was missing from our code. They also recommended that the gifts and hospitality threshold should remain at £25 rather than £50. Members are just asked to consider this code and recommend that full council approves it at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. I know we do have quite a few members here actually who are on audit and governance, so it would be useful to get your feedback about what was discussed at the time and obviously what your thoughts are in relation to Constitution Committee. So, Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Just reading through it again, if you look at Appendix 1 and look at page 3 there, the application of the Code of Conduct, and it gives you a number of things, bullet points, as to when it applies to you. I actually am of the opinion that whatever you do while you are a councillor is reflective of the fact that you're a councillor, whether you're actually in that capacity at that particular time or not. So, for example, if I went into a pub, got roaring drunk and got into a fight, I think that reflects my position as a councillor, even though I wasn't on council duty at the time. Do you see? So I don't think that that is reflected in what we've got written there. And I just wondered if people felt that that maybe, you know, some kind of wording to say that you're always responsible, if you like, for the position that you hold.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on page 5.
I can't hear you, Anne.
Sorry, yeah, I've got my mic in the right place now. Sorry, like you, I'm trying to have me dinner. Right, on page 5, it says complaints about the conduct of a parish councillor towards a clerk should be made by the chair or by the parish council as a whole. I think it should be a two-way thing. I mean, what if it's the clerk towards a parish councillor? You know, it's not just going to be from the parish councillor to a clerk. I just wondered if we could clarify in a sense that it works both ways but still have the same process of how it would be reported and dealt with. I don't have a problem with that, but it could be the other way around. Everybody's quiet. Have I missed the point?
No, a pretty good time to bring Hayley back in for both Councillor Marshall's point there and also Councillor Harrison's. I don't know your thoughts on those, Hayley. You're muted.
Sorry, I had problems coming off mute there. In relation to Councillor Harrison's points, I know that that section was particularly looked at by the LGA and was actually the wording that's attached in this model now is slightly amended from previously. But I'd be happy to consider any other changes that members wanted to suggest. And in relation to Councillor Marshall, I think that was your point that if it's a complaint by the clerk about the parish councillor?
No, it says complaints about the conduct of a parish councillor towards the clerk. Well, surely a clerk could be in the position that they are making him appropriate towards a parish councillor. So
I think that
to me,
because
yeah,
I see what I see what you're saying, but I think that the code, this specific code, is in relation to councillors and parish councillors rather than a clerk isn't elected to that position, but so there probably just need to be some other way of dealing with a complaint against a clerk that the parish council could consider, but this particular code wouldn't apply to the clerk.
Oh, I see. No, you're all right then. Yeah.
Councillor James?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I totally agree with what Brenda Harrison was saying, because the headline on Hartlepool Mail wouldn't say Mrs. Harrison did this or that. It would say Councillor Harrison was arrested by police in Church Street for brawling. Wouldn't that's what the headline would be? So it is a job that's a 24/7, 7 days a week job. And I think that has to be reflected somewhere. So I agree with that comment. The other thing that I wanted to raise really is with what Hayley's just been saying, because the resolution that was moved by me in council is something that gives it in both directions. And it also goes to the point where it says that if a member is found to be guilty of harassment either of another member or of an officer, then if they're actually found to have done that, then they should immediately resign their position. Because so I think we have to look at that motion, and whilst we may not be able to enforce it legally, i.e. make a member resign, I think that the onus ought to be that when they sign their acceptance declaration at the elections, that it's actually on there that they will resign if they're found to be guilty of harassment or sexual misconduct with another, whether it's a member or whether it's an officer, is irrelevant to me. I mean, and in some ways it's worse if it's an officer, because of the protected status of being a member. If you've just harassed somebody that you work with as a member of staff, you could be stood at the end of their desk every day of 5 days a week. And they have to put up with that, even though they know that they've complained about you and that there's a case pending. Now, if it was an officer against an officer, under normal circumstances, one or other or both would be suspended from their job pending an inquiry. They can't do that with elected members. So there is a real difficulty, and I think that we have to have something that prevents a member that is an elected member actually harassing either another elected member or a member of staff. It's absolutely, totally unacceptable to me. And I think that that's a big hole in this conduct arrangement. So, I mean, the motion is there that I moved in council. And I think that we have to look at how much of that we can actually get into this, because this may be our one and only opportunity. But I then want Hayley to look at the declaration that we sign at the point of accepting our term of office, i.e. post-election. And that has to be done, in my view, because there's just too much of it. Not necessarily in Hartlepool. We've got to look at what happens in other places, but we need to protect Hartlepool and protect both members and staff in that way.
Councillor James, can I ask? I mean, I don't disagree with anything you've just said. I'm actually just trying to think of kind of the practicalities and how it works. So, who would determine whether somebody has been found guilty as part of this kind of complaint?
Well,
in your mind, what would be the process for it?
I know that it's difficult, Shane, because if it's a member of staff against a member of staff, then there's obviously an appeals and grievance procedure to go through. So we have a procedure. There is no counter procedure for elected members, and I think that there should be. So that there is a process of who would deal with it, how it would be policed, and what the outcomes might be. But there has to be a process. And I think that starting with the basic process that we have for staff, where there is a grievance, you raise a grievance and say this person's doing so and so and so and so to me, your line manager, assuming that they are not the person carrying out the harassment, then looks at that and makes a recommendation one way or another. But ultimately, the victim has the right to appeal and for it to go before members, ultimately, for a decision. Now, if a member of staff is found guilty, then I would expect that the final straw would be that they are removed from their position, they lose their job. If it's that bad, they lose their job, they're sacked. So there has to be something that we need a process, Shane. And
Yeah.
I don't know how we come to it, but we have to have a process where members themselves would have a right to raise a grievance, because it could be a member of staff that's bullying a member, or it could be the other way around. But there has to be a comparable process. And whilst I accept that that's a difficult conversation to have, I think we have to have it.
I completely agree, and I think you're right. I'm just, as you were talking, I was trying to think in my mind how it would work, and for me personally, I'd prefer it to be. It would be something that would be handled by independent persons, because otherwise, and I'm not saying this would be the case, but there is a very real possibility that if it was left to other elected members to kind of be the judge and jury on it, that either, depending on political makeup of a committee or a panel or anything else, somebody might get away with blue murder, or conversely, it might be they could be potentially brought forward on a political charge and be forced to resign because the makeup of said committee is of the opposite persuasion, if you see what I mean. So for me, it would have to be completely impartial.
Well, I agree with that, Shane, but whatever the process is, and I mean, at the moment, we only have one independent person, and I know that we're trying to recruit, but again, that is a reason why, I think that we should have at least 3 independent persons, so that if they were forming a tribunal panel to look at the conduct of a member, where it's a serious offence that they've been accused of, then I can agree with that, with legal support and the right to appeal. I think that process would work, but the ultimate outcome has to be the same as a member of staff. You would lose your position, because the victim cannot be left in a position where they don't have any rights to do anything, and that member would still be able to get to that member of staff regardless, unless they're removed from office.
I've got Councillor Tennant want to come in.
Thank you, Shane. Yeah, I mean, I think the impartiality aspect of what we've just been discussing is absolutely crucial to making sure it's a fair process for both parties should such a situation arise. I just want to come back to Councillor Marshall's point with regard to the clerks and parish council thing. It needs to be reminded that my view is that this is a members' code of conduct review. There's also, if we look at the council constitution, there's also a officers' code of conduct, which is separate thing. So I think that we need to make that separation. But I get your point, but I'm sure that there could be a reflective position text similar to what's written there about the parish councillor towards a clerk. There should be one clerk towards a parish councillor in the officers' code of conduct in order to reflect the point Councillor Marshall made. I mean, I don't disagree with the point that there needs to be a process, as Marjorie's pointed out, and then Shane has indicated some support for that. But I really want to reiterate the point that it must be politically impartial and it must be personally impartial in order to make sure that process is fair for all parties involved, should such a situation arise.
Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would totally agree with Marjorie's point about having a process. So I would support that very much. I think there should be a process for elected members, and I also agree with what's been said about it being independent. So the sooner we get some independent persons, the better, because they are missing really, and I think we are missing, them for needing to use them sometimes. So I do agree with that. Coming back to the point I made, can I just make a suggestion, Hayley, which you can throw out by all means, or you can reword or whatever. But I would just suggest that another bullet point is put there at the bottom of page 3, to say something like, you will take responsibility for any personal actions while holding the office of councillor, or something to that effect. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Haley, sorry to put you on the spot, but in your legal opinion, how best could we weave in the requirements from the motion that's in best practice number 1 into what we've just been discussing, into actually making it a requirement and putting some kind of process in place?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful because the law is that there is no power to suspend or effectively sack a councillor unless they've been convicted of an offence which carries a 3 month, I think 3 month sentence or a suspended sentence. So we need to be careful that we don't go over and above what is allowed by the legislation. We are in the process of reviewing the officer member protocol, and it may be that something could be put into there. But I'd really need to give it a bit more consideration as to what type of process that we could introduce in the future.
Can I ask then, Haley, excuse me, as part of this review, and I remember when we were discussing it previously, there was a discussion nationally about reintroducing sanctions and kind of giving code of conduct some teeth. What was the kind of end result of that, or is it still ongoing?
It is still ongoing. So, but I think at the moment, because of COVID hitting, everything seems to have been put on hold. But it is definitely something that it was a recommendation from the Standards Committee. So hopefully in the future that will be reintroduced. But like I said, it will require central government to legislate for that.
Okay. Councillor James?
Thank you, Chair. Then I accept what you're saying, Haley, that it would be a change in legislation to allow it to actually take place, which is why I was saying that at the point where you would sign to say I accept the office being offered to me that I've won by election, which is normally on the night of the election that we sign the papers, that there needed to be something added to that. But it may be that as a starting point, we need to take the discussion back to the LGA and say that we're concerned that, you know, there has been publicity in the press about MPs, House of Lords, councillors. To me, it makes no difference who it is. You don't have the right to harass or sexually harass any individual over which you have power. And that's what it's about. It's, you know, sexual harassment is not about sex. It's about power. And so where that power relationship is, it's absolutely unacceptable that you abuse that, in my view. Now, if we can get the LGA to come up with some wording, well, then we may be halfway to actually getting Parliament to accept it into law. Because to be fair, I think more MPs would be affected by it than councillors, or I would hope so. But we have to have that protection. And I think it's absolutely right that members are held to account.
Sorry, go on, Haley.
I was just going to say, Chair, that as part of the review as well of the officer member protocol running alongside this, I'd be happy to speak to the LGA and to write to them about to get an update on what's happening and whether there's any other pressure that we can try to put on central government to get this moving.
Yeah, I think I'd be keen for that, and I can see a couple of other people nodding. Obviously, there will be disappointment that we're not able to do it ourselves, but I think in the absence of that, it would be the most prudent course of action for us to take if everybody else agrees. Denise?
Totally agree.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think once we lost the Standards Committee a few years ago, that sort of whipping effect actually was taken away from us, and I think you would agree with everything that the members have been saying. I know Haley and I regularly speak to the LGA, so we can talk to them. So that's a really good point, I think, to take forward.
Thank you. Were there any other points in there that members wanted to raise or question? No? Well, the recommendations are as they are in the report then, obviously with the additional ones that we will re-engage with the LGA and push, and push for some further clarification on the sanctions and the other items of work that they're supposed to be ongoing with. Okay, any dissent from that? No? Just lower your hand, Haley. Thank you. Next one then is the periodic review of the council's constitution.
Thank you, Chair. So this report, following last year's senior management restructure, a number of service areas and functions have now moved to report to another department or a different director. The proposals are set out in section 3 of the report to try and align the services and functions with their new department, whilst acknowledging that some of them are cross-cutting. A member seminar was held on the 11th of January where members commented on the need to retain a Regeneration Services Committee to ensure inward investment and economic growth sit outside of F&P, Finance and Policy Committee, to avoid conflict and ensure good scrutiny and challenge. Members are asked to consider the proposals as set out now in section 3, which have been amended since the member seminar, and make recommendations to full council. Members are also asked to consider whether there should be a change to the name of the Regeneration Services Committee to possibly something like the Economic Growth Services Committee. So members' views are sought on that as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. I mean, to be honest, I'm happy with everything that's in there. The only thing I did question is in relation to the change from Regeneration Services Committee. I don't know about anybody else, but I get economic growth because that makes sense. And we moved as part of the restructure. Regeneration became everybody's responsibility because it isn't just the responsibility of one department. It cuts across so many of them. So I get the move to economic growth, but I question whether or not we need to sandwich in the services because Economic Growth Services Committee just doesn't seem to sound right to me, to be honest, but I'm happy to see what other people think. Councillor Tennant.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm with Shane on this. I think the proposals are quite robust, and I think the new name for the Regeneration Services Committee, I think that probably makes a lot of sense to call it Economic Growth Services, because that's largely the catch-all point of that committee. If you look at the area that it's supposed to cover, and the fact it's supposed to be, sort of across the board, joined up thinking rather than on its own. If members can understand what I mean with that, but I'm happy with the suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I think I do support keeping a committee for economic action or activity, whatever you want to call it. I'm quite relaxed on. But I do think that we should not be removing the committee altogether. I think it's helpful to have something that is clear and what its role is, and to assist in scrutiny and public overview, because residents need to be able to understand what committees do and what comes out of committees that affect their lives at the end of the day. So I think that we should not be removing a committee, because one of the other effects of doing that is you would either have to increase the membership of all committees, or you're at risk when you go up to 36 councillors, it'll be even worse, that you'll have some members that can avoid being on any committee other than full council. And I think that that's absolutely disgraceful, that that would be an opportunity that could be taken by some. So we have to have sufficient committees in number that all members can participate, and that it's a rarity for a member to be relieved of duty in some ways because maybe they have other commitments. You know, so it would be completely unfair to all of those other members that are maybe on 2 or 3 committees for any member to have the right to not do anything other than attend full council. So I do support keeping this committee. And so I said I'm quite relaxed on what it's called, but I think we have to have it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor James. Denise?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm with you, Chair. I like the idea of dropping the word services, and the reason for that is economic growth isn't the role of the council, it's the role of everybody, be you public or private sector. And I've had a couple of interesting meetings in the last week where talking to the private sector, there might be times when we need to come to a committee and and share that information when it's available to go public. And this would be, because economic growth isn't just down to the role of the council, we all have that responsibility. So it was just to sort of input that. And I think there's also a role that we've maybe been missing in the past, where we actually look at the sectors that are important to Hartlepool. We've seen the hospitality sector, for example, be decimated with the pandemic that we're in, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that back. But we'll then need to look at it. Do we need to have an action plan, a strategy to support that sector? And it could be a culture sector, it's hospitality, it could be manufacturing. But I think this committee would then give that opportunity to do that.
I think you're absolutely right. And it gives, I think, for a little bit too long, we've relied on the combined authority to pull all of that data together for us, and kind of rely on that as well. So it'd be good to be able to bring it back and make sure that we've got a keen eye on the ball. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, I wouldn't be happy about losing the committee either, because when I was a councillor before, I sat on the regeneration for 8 years, and I'm sitting on it now. I just think if it was reduced, we'd lose quite a lot in the ether, because the committees would be smaller. We would have probably more things to discuss, but not enough time to discuss them in. And as Marjorie brought up about the proportionality as well, with us getting extra councillors, this is going to sway the numbers that sit on each. Either we go up, or, as Marjorie said, some won't even need to sit on any. And I don't think as a councillor you can afford to do that. You need to be actively involved and take part in something that you're interested in. So as for dropping the services out of the committee name, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, as long as it serves its purpose, it shouldn't really matter what it's called. But yeah, I don't think we need that in it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I agree with the idea of keeping that particular committee for all the reasons that have been outlined. And I do think that it needs to change its name. To just give it a little bit more oomph, if nothing else. But you don't actually need to drop regeneration in the title of it. So just a suggestion, and again, you can throw it out, do with it what you want. But we could call it Economic Growth and Regeneration Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is basically both, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah.
You can't really separate the two. So,
yeah.
And I think it's a very good idea to have the economic growth there at the beginning, because I think that reflects certainly the sign of the times at the present. Because as we come out of COVID, hopefully one day, the economic growth will be more important than ever. So I do think, economic growth, but there's no need to actually drop regeneration. I suggest. Thank you.
To be honest, I personally don't mind either way. I think the rationale behind it was, as with the corporate side of things, it was to try and prove the point that regeneration sits across all of the service areas. But I'm fine with that if other people are as well. Councillor James. I don't know if you.
Hello.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
am right. I'm just saying. I don't know whether you want to take Councillor Howson first because she's not spoken yet.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I've got Councillor Loynes and then House, and I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree. We should keep this committee. And it's funny that Councillor Harrison said about economic and regeneration, because that's what I'd written down. I think we should keep them both in, and then people will know exactly what that committee is about. And it's better, I think. So I would go with keeping it, but keeping it as Economic and Regeneration Committee. I think it's invaluable, and we should not get rid of that committee at all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Loynes. Councillor Howson.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to support the idea of maintaining, keeping the committee. It's absolutely key for the town. And also, as Councillor Loynes and Harrison has said, I think regeneration, to keep that part of the name, is important, as well as economic growth. Keeps it clear and consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll go back to Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Totally agree, really, with what both Brendas have said. And I think that you were quite right, Brenda Harrison, when you said that it should be called Economic Growth and Regeneration Committee. I think that's quite okay. But I just want to say that for about 3 or 4 months now, and other members are aware of it, the suggestion was made through the hairdressing sector to look at having some kind of tallies similar to what we have in the hygiene thing, where you would have up to 5 stars, and that may assist if we ever it's very probable that at some time, not in the too distant future, we could be back exactly where we are now in lockdown for some other health issue. So now that we've had a taste of it, we need to find the ways that we can keep our economy working, but in a safe manner. So I would want this committee, once it's re-established, to actually take up that and to work, as Denise said, with the sectors that we have active in Hartlepool, to look at how those sectors could be protected should we actually have a further pandemic or some other reason why activity was reduced. Because that's how we maintain jobs, and that's how we actually build our economy back. But we're also trying to protect it from future problems before they come. So to me, that's one of the jobs that this committee would definitely need to take up quite soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I mean, the committee itself, Regeneration Services Committee, hasn't never been stood down. It's still there. So if there was a desire, I'm sure if people contacted the chair of the committee, they'd be able to put some items on the agenda. But I think we know where we're going now, don't we? So there's been no desire to change any of the other recommendations other than the proposed change to the name of Regeneration Services Committee. And I think most members are quite keen for us to then move to an Economic Growth and Regeneration Services. Do we need to have Services Committee, just Economic Growth and Regeneration Committee?
No, just committee.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, agreed. Yeah. So if everybody is happy with that, we'll go with those recommendations. I don't see any dissent. Great, thank you. And that's it then, other than I don't have any business which I consider urgent, but I know Councillor Loynes has said, I mean, I don't have any other business, but Councillor James, sorry, I was looking at you, Brenda.
Right, I just wanted to take the opportunity, Chair, really, to revisit the sheet of paper that we all had at Council that gave us the proportional update by different grouping of members. And that I would hope that what was said in full council, I'm just looking for some confirmation, really, that this is not an attempt to have a full-blown review of who sits on what committees. And I'm particularly concerned about the Socialist Labour Party, which is the party that I am part of. Because when we actually had the AGM, and I accept we haven't had one this year, we agreed to just continue where we are. And from a personal point of view, if there is a further extension of the position, then I think we should do exactly the same, because it's just so unsettling otherwise. But what I wanted to make clear was that at the actual AGM that we had, so not this year, last year, a number of groups, including the SLP, actually traded seats on some committees in order to have seats on other committees. So it wasn't just a one-way street. I mean, we gave up seats on adults and children's in order to have 2 seats in other places, and other groups did the same. But ultimately, we reached a position where we were all happy with it. So in order to accommodate the fact that, and I never thought I would have to be able to say this, but I can say it, the 6 members that are now formed the Labour group on Hartlepool Borough Council, I mean, there were 40 when I first joined the council, but they're down to 6, in order to accommodate their needs to deprive certain members of the seats that they were allocated and that they've occupied for all of this time. That we don't just destabilise the whole arrangement. So I just wanted some confirmation that that is not the intention and that it won't actually be the outcome.
I mean, I can bring Hayley in to respond, but I do know from my involvement as a group leader, the intention really and the desire from all group leaders was that we weren't going back to a full-blown roundtable discussion, and there was an agreement made from all group leaders that we would try and make changes as minimal as possible, but still make sure that groups were at least fairly represented. So there was no desire from anybody that I was aware of to go back to a full-blown roundtable discussion. But I'm happy to bring Hayley in just to clarify.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's absolutely right. We didn't want to do a whole-scale review because if the election goes ahead, we'll be doing all of that again in a couple of months' time. So we really only sought to make sure with it where Labour, because of resignations, has lost seats. We were just seeking to make sure that they had somebody in the seat that their group is entitled to, and then the remaining seats, that those were effectively spare seats that were to be opened up to anyone, because the committees that we were particularly focusing on that have had changes, all of the other groups either have their entitlement or have above their entitlement. And with agreement from group leaders, there'd been some more movement, but that's all that we were really seeking to do, was just to balance as far as we possibly could the ones that were actually affected by the group changes.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you, Hayley. Councillor Prince.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so just to follow on from what Hayley's just said, because a couple of the members that left Labour group were on the same committees, which is why we were going to take up the seats there, and I'm on quite a few committees now, so I would have been more than happy to give up some of my other committees in order to put the political balance. Should the members who would have been coming off committees wanted some of my other seats, I would have happily sort of exchanged them, just to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's just hope everything goes ahead in May, and then we can talk about
like
it again
it,
afterwards.
Chairman. I mean, the whisper on the grapevine, and it's getting loud, is that it'll be at least the autumn.
At least I'll get to see you till a bit longer, Mark, for a bit longer.
I know you can't cope without me. That's the problem. Because all of the knowledge that I've gained over 22 years goes with me.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. Right, thank you, members. That's all. I don't have anything else for today. So thank you all very much for your input and your presence. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care of yourselves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you
Thanks
soon.
very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
bye.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.